If you're an online seller in the United States, selling on Amazon is a no-brainer. Amazon and e-commerce are almost synonyms. That's because Amazon's market share in the US is so big that if you don't sell on Amazon, you're missing out. When you want to sell outside the US though, Amazon is not necessarily the largest marketplace in other countries. Amazon may still be a great starting point for an international expansion, but other marketplaces may offer better customer reach in addition to your Amazon shop. I'm talking about marketplaces such as Allegro in Poland, Finac in France, Bol.com in Holland, Mercado Livre in Brazil. These are all leading marketplaces in other countries. Naturally, you will need to open multiple sales channels, maybe including your own branded localized website, which adds complexity to managing such a large international operation. So today I talked to Levi Reed, who's a former Amazon category merchant manager, whose job was to help sellers become aware and enroll into different programs Amazon was offering. Among them, the Amazon Global Selling Program. He took the lessons learned while working on Amazon and another startup and went on to become the co-founder of Unimart. Unimart does precisely that. It's an AI-powered omnichannel platform for global operations. Levi provided us with great insights for people who want to sell internationally. And I had a great conversation with Levi. I hope you enjoy it too. Please consider following our channel for more videos like this. My name is Rafael Berti, and this is Intrepid Sellers. Hey everybody, thank you for joining in. We have a special treat for you today. We have Levi here with us, and Levi Reed, and I'm gonna let you do your own introduction, man. If you can tell us a little bit about you and where you're from and what you're doing.
Yeah, sounds great. So I'm actually from the East Coast of the U.S. originally, from upstate New York. I grew up on a dairy farm out there, and I live in Seattle now. So I'm a co-founder at Unimart. We're an e-commerce platform to enable, or rather accelerate, organic growth for e-commerce sellers. Happy to get more into that later. Prior to this, I helped launch a new brand for a healthcare company. And then before that, I was at Amazon for about 5 years in a variety of roles, mostly oriented around product marketing and go-to-market, new product launches, some partnerships work as well. And then outside of that, I'm very involved in just kind of the startup ecosystem environment here in Seattle. As an investor, as a mentor, I help run an accelerator here in the city. So definitely an area, of passion for me. So I've been with Unimart now for about 9 months. It's been quite a ride. Very, very exciting. And pretty cool actually to kind of still be in the e-commerce space while also working in B2B SaaS. That's a new experience as well. But yeah, that's kind of my overview, I'd say.
Cool. That sounds really nice, man. I'm very curious because you're the first one that comes to the show, and you worked at Amazon, and Amazon is closely related to my work. And I actually wanted to know how did you land a job at Amazon?
Yeah.
And how was it to work for them?
Yeah, great question. So I did my MBA at ESADE in Barcelona. And I was fortunate enough there to land an internship with Amazon through a great deal of preparation. I was especially lucky because at the time, Amazon had two MBA internship options available for non-technical folks like myself. One was, I'm forgetting the names of the programs now, but one was basically operations focused and put folks on a track to become, leaders in the fulfillment centers, the Amazon warehouses. And the other was essentially the business side track. So going into the retail or consumer side of the business into roles like a in-stock manager, vendor manager, or a buyer is what you call it anywhere else, marketing manager, et cetera. My school historically sent people to the operations arm. I think the year that I interned with Amazon, we had something like 10 or 11 people go to the operations side, and we only had 3 people go to the business side. So I was lucky enough to land one of those spots. So I interned with Amazon in Luxembourg on the consumer side and worked on kind of a deep dive into an email data analysis project, which sounds dry as a bone, but actually ended up being very interesting. And then I was fortunate enough to receive a full-time offer out of that. I had to argue with them for a couple of months because the full-time offer was for Luxembourg, and I didn't really want to stay in Luxembourg. So I ended up having the offer moved to Seattle, moved out here, and joined full-time. Initially, I joined in a consumer role, as in the Amazon consumer retail business, as what's called a category merchant manager. So basically, I was responsible for the third party side of the business for media categories in the U.S. So any Amazon team, or rather any Amazon retail category team, you typically have someone, a director or a senior manager who's the category leader, and they're sort of in charge of that entire category. This could be like pets, for example. And then under that person, you have a marketing team, you have a vendor management team, which are the buyers. You have an in-stock team, which is basically managing inventory and operations. You might have some product managers, some other folks like that. And then you typically have one CMM, category merchant manager. And basically, when you look at the breakdown of the retail category, you have back when I was there, the majority of the revenue would typically come through 1P, so vendor relationships. They're selling the product to Amazon. Amazon is then reselling on their behalf. But then you'd also have a sizable chunk that would be 3P, which are the sellers who actually are using the marketplace, right? They're setting their own prices, they're managing their own storefront, they're essentially using Amazon as a service. Now, the makeup of this, of course, has changed significantly, and Amazon's investing heavily in 3P now. But at the time, it was much more even balance, and 3P was often treated as a little bit of an afterthought. Still, I would say I think it was one of the best ways for me, at least, to join the company. Getting that early exposure and being able to work with those third-party businesses directly, it's very, very rewarding. Both of my parents are small business owners, and were my entire childhood. So I think there's a certain empathy that comes along with that. A lot of 3P sellers I worked with, their big complaint was just that they were ignored by Amazon, even if they were very large. They couldn't get the support that they needed, and they were often quite frustrated. So my job in that first role was trying to convince them to enroll in different types of programs that we were offering, like commingled inventory, for example, that required some trust on their part, but offered a lot of potential for mutual benefit to both Amazon and the sellers. And to do that, that meant building relationships, building trust, right? And providing them with a way to feel confident that they would get any issues resolved promptly. So I ended up having significant success actually enrolling folks into that program by taking that exact approach. And that really kind of cemented me personally on a path where I felt that Amazon is famously customer obsessed, but that means the end consumer. It doesn't mean the seller. And I would argue, actually, this is what gave Shopify a foothold. Shopify came in and said, we're not Amazon. Sellers are our customers. We're focusing on that. And it was like this breath of fresh air for a lot of the third-party sellers. That's been my area of focus as well. I really enjoy working with those businesses directly. I really enjoy supporting those sellers. At this point, my brother now is an e-commerce seller, quite a successful one. So I guess runs the family.
Are you all selling on Amazon?
I don't know if he's still selling on Amazon. He was. So he makes handmade leather products and vegan leather products. Dog products, and also he does a lot of custom work for costumes, things like that. And I know he was selling on Amazon Handmade. I believe he stopped and is focusing mainly on Etsy and some other sources at the moment. Honestly, for some of these same reasons, right? It was very difficult for him to work with Amazon, and if there was any kind of an issue, it was really challenging to get it resolved, and that's a big part of why he ended up moving away from the platform. But so that's really just kind of an area of focus for me. That's where I sort of oriented my career around within Amazon. With one exception, all of the roles I held were seller focused. And of course, that's a big part of the focus of Unimart. Sellers are our customers. That's who we're working with directly, and we're trying to support their businesses. So I think that it was a very organic transition.
It sounds all very interesting. And Unimart is all about the internationalization of the business.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, do you have any experience with Amazon? Does Amazon have you work on any sort of like the Amazon Global program that allows sellers to go to other markets as well? Did you have any contact with that?
Minimally, yes. So my last role with the company was with the Launchpad program, with Amazon Launchpad. So this is a program that works with earlier stage companies that are offering a unique, innovative product in some way. And basically the idea is it's not an accelerator in the traditional sense, but it's a program that is designed to accelerate growth on the Amazon platform. It's essentially a revenue share off the top. The sellers provide a small portion of the revenue they make off Amazon as an additional fee on top of FBA or whatever, anything else they're paying. And in return, they gain access to a whole suite of specialized services, discounted services. They make it free access to otherwise expensive tools like Premium A+ content, for example, or they might be eligible for programs and services that they otherwise wouldn't even be eligible for. So my role there was leading those partnerships and actually landing new benefits both inside the company and outside of the company for those sellers. And of course, international expansion was a big part of that. So some experience there, but I think taking a more holistic look at the industry when we talk about organic growth, right? We're talking about multi-channel expansion and cross-border expansion. So that's where the international growth piece comes in. And what we often say, when you look at the options available, you kind of have exempting Unimart, because this is the problem we're trying to solve. Aside from Unimart, you kind of have three types of solutions. You have solutions that aggregate your front end, your catalog management, your product listings, maybe your paid ad spend, that kind of thing. And they can do that across channels and many of them, across countries as well, across marketplaces. So you can kind of aggregate all that front end work, makes expansion and maintenance much easier, or management, I should say. Then you have other platforms. I know FlowSpace is a really good one here, for example, that aggregate your backend, your operational supply chain logistics, that kind of thing, order management, inventory management, warehouse management, that kind of stuff. So that enables easier expansion across multiple channels. But a lot of sellers look at this and they go, well, I don't want separate pieces of software for this. I want everything put together, right? I want all of these pieces linked. And if you're going to start pursuing true omni-channel, where you're actually selling across different types of channels and presenting a unified customer experience across all of those channels, this is really kind of what you need. You need that unified front end and back end. The problem is most of the software that exists, most of the good solutions for this are tied to a particular channel, right? So Amazon, for example, state of the art, right? You've got everything you need. It's like an e-commerce store in a box. From paid ads to warehousing and last mile fulfillment, all ready to go. International expansion, very easy from that point of view, even if you're not using one of the, Amazon services designed to support that. The problem is you're stuck with Amazon. And a lot of US sellers, I think, kind of end up with a bit of a nasty awakening because we're so saturated. Amazon and e-commerce are almost synonymous in the US. As soon as you get outside of the US, Amazon has nowhere near the same market share, right? So if you really want to experience comparable growth, you have to start adding new channels. And that's essentially the problem we're trying to solve. At Unimart, what we're doing is we're unifying that front-end management, the back-end management. So we provide automated catalog management, product listings, AI solutions to automate maintenance and updates, automate pricing, that kind of thing. And at the same time, unifying the back end. We offer our customers a marketplace of 3PL partners in different countries, order, warehouse, and inventory management, aggregation, data management. So we're trying to provide that kind of holistic, like Amazon-like experience for the seller, but not tied to a particular channel so they can expand more easily. So that's essentially the goal we're working towards. It's interesting to see, though, when you take an Amazon, for example, Amazon's doing something that I think most of the great tech companies do. They're disrupting themselves before somebody else has a chance to. We see with the launch of Buy with Prime, Amazon's really embracing this idea that in the future, sellers are going to follow their customers in being channel agnostic. They're not going to be as tied to a particular marketplace or particular channel. And so I think what Amazon's trying to do is make their services, they're moving to a very service-based approach. I think we're going to see this over the next few years increasingly. And they're going to look to be involved in every piece of the e-commerce ecosystem to whatever extent possible, even if that means disrupting their own marketplace. So that's a pretty exciting shift to see. It'd be very, very cool to see where that goes in the future. Anyway, I'm going to pause there, Raphael, because I just realized I'm getting way off track from your original question. So maybe we should realign.
No, they're definitely fine. Just keep talking. You said many interesting things there. And I really like what you're saying about what Amazon is doing in terms of internationalization. And also, I made a post on LinkedIn a while back about some purchases that Amazon made in terms, it looks like Amazon is trying to facilitate at least for registered brands on Amazon to have some kind of platform that is outside of Amazon. So basically some kind of a Shopify, but it's somehow connected to Amazon still, right? So you can create your own branded store outside of Amazon, but in the background, the whole thing is managed and it's still going through Amazon. Yeah. So like you have all the fulfillment, you have the website in itself. It looks like I don't know if they're trying to take this on Shopify. That probably would be, because the number one reason sellers would go to Shopify, it's really the consumer data, right? Amazon is very strict in terms of how much you can market your product.
That's going to be a big one.
Consumers. So when I started in Amazon, it was really fun times, because when I started, Amazon did not hash the email addresses of the consumers.
So what we did, we took their email addresses and we would email them and say, hey, if you purchase from our store, you would get, I don't know, 15% discount, which was basically the fee that Amazon would be charging us as sellers.
Mm-hmm.
And Amazon quickly realized that was the problem. So like, okay, so no more, nobody, and then became very strict in terms of, even putting advertising in the box of
Yeah.
your product that would be
Yeah.
against their TOS. So that has certainly changed. I'm talking about 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But then it became a problem. And then I could see that this is where Shopify could raise up, because Shopify is still giving the freedom that and the sellers still own the customer data, and that's
Yeah.
important for brand growth specifically, and brand following.
Yeah.
I think more and more Amazon is tackling that as well. I mean, they're giving more freedom. They recently released a tool that allow you to email your customers. Still very limited though. But
there's some
getting
resources there for the brands too that often. But the interesting thing, like when I was on Launchpad, there's a whole brand management dashboard that has a surprising amount of data that brands are supposed to have access to after they meet certain criteria, which I'm afraid I can't remember off the top of my head, but I can say that most brands in brand registry have met those criteria. But the problem is that it's deliberately not spoken about. The brands don't know about it. So it has to be given to them manually. And so if the data isn't looked at and a brand isn't automatically updated with this, they don't even know to ask for it. There's a surprising number of opportunities within Amazon like that. But yeah, I completely agree with you. And the data is a huge pain point. You hear from the brands all the time.
Cool. I want to move on then to still in your experience. So you were in Amazon before, and then you move on to launch a brand. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I worked with a
consumer brand, right?
A consumer brand, exactly. Yeah. So it was with a hearing care company. So they manufacture hearing aids and associated hardware and equipment, and they were primarily a wholesaler. So they sell through audiologists and whatnot. But back in 2017, there was a bill pushed through. It was actually one of our precious few bipartisan bills here in the U.S. And I'm forgetting the name of the bill now, but essentially the idea was that it was a directive to the FDA to create a category of over-the-counter hearing aids, because at the moment in the U.S. the legislation is extremely fuzzy. Most people think that you have to go through a licensed provider for hearing aids. The truth is that's not exactly the case, but it hasn't really been clearly legally defined when it can be exempted. There's a number of lawsuits that have happened around this point. So this was designed to create clarity around this point and mandate for the FDA to create licensing agreement, or not licensing, I'm sorry, but like a regulatory structure around OTC, over-the-counter hearing aids, so direct-to-consumer sales. So, in the past couple of years, all of the major providers have been, of course, very conscious about this. There's been at least one company that spun up and actually got to the point where it was publicly listed, built essentially entirely around taking advantage of this change. The difficulty is that the FDA has not actually created those regulations yet. They've been stalling, and COVID, of course, has not helped. So we're kind of, with respect to the hearing aid industry in the U.S., it's kind of this perpetual gray area. So I joined this firm to essentially launch a direct-to-consumer hearing aid brand that would meet all of the requirements that we believed the FDA would put in place for OTC hearing aids, and then some, actually. And essentially build that brand and get it ready for launch. So very much what we'd call like an entrepreneurial position. Essentially, I was building a new company within an existing company. So brought a team on board and built out the brand. Unfortunately, the project, or at least my role with it, met a fate that I think will be familiar to most people who have been in the situation. It turned out there just really was not alignment at the executive level about moving forward with this plan. There was a lot of fear about what it might mean to the wholesale business, the existing wholesale business. And so ultimately the project was not exactly killed, but reshaped to a degree that I was no longer particularly interested in being part of it. So I ended up leaving that position actually after just under a year, but it really solidified for me. I'd gotten a taste of what I've been calling entrepreneurship light, right? Like I said to my friends at the time, I felt like I was having 80% of the fun of a real founder and only about 20% of the risk and stress. But ultimately came to a bit of a sticky end there. So coming out of that experience, I was pretty dead set. I wanted to join a startup. I was really looking for more like Series B, a little bit more mature. But just through my network, I ended up connecting with Unimart. And so they were an Indian company at the time in the process of redomiciling to the US.
Mhm.
And I just really fell in love with the concept, really enjoyed the founding team. Our CEO, Shayak, is just really a very impressive leader, frankly. Someone I've learned a ton from and been very, it's really been a privilege to work with this team, honestly. So I met with him. I met with the team. We exchanged references, had some calls, and about 2 weeks later, I said, you know what, let's do it. Let's work together. So we worked together for a few weeks as the company was being moved over to the U.S., and then I joined as a co-founder in the U.S. company as we established it. And so essentially, my role
Mhm.
is as GM of the U.S. business. In theory, I mean, it's a startup, right? We're all kind of doing everything. So
Yeah.
I've been focusing on the marketing angle, trying to support sales. Been learning a ton about B2B SaaS sales. Maybe not as much as I need to, but we're getting there. But yeah,
But
it's
that's
been
how
an
it is.
experience.
We wear many hats in the beginning as a startup. There's
Yes,
no job we cannot do. We do everything.
exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been learning video editing. That was a new experience.
I'm learning podcasting.
There you go. Same here, man. I feel your pain. No, it's been fun though.
But
It's been
how's
fun.
this experience? How has it been, this experience of being an entrepreneur? I mean, because you worked for a large corporation before,
Yeah.
and then you launched a brand, a consumer brand, and now you're going to entrepreneurship, which are very different
Yeah.
experiences, I would say.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious how the entrepreneurship is being so far for you, as in, of course, not just tied to the success of the company, but
Right.
the challenge of making a company grow.
Yeah. It can be overwhelming, to be honest. There's this certain look that former folks who are either founders or very early employees in startups, when you talk to them after they're out of it, they get this slightly I don't know, it's a combination between excitement and haunted, honestly. You kind of look at me and go, oh, you've been through some things. And I'm starting to understand why. It's definitely, it's very stressful for sure. I think honestly, the two biggest differences between startup life and corporate life, I would say, I mean, there's a lot of differences, but the two big ones that stand out for me, one is the way that your work comes to you. When you're in a corporate environment, even frankly at a relatively senior level, your work tends to come to you. It's sort of produced by the structure of the organization you're in, right? So, there's clear things that need to be done to meet the goals, meet the expectations, keep the team moving forward. The work is sort of structured in that respect. And yeah, you might launch new programs, you might build out new things, whatever, and that can be more unstructured, but that's usually a smaller portion of your job. And in most environments, you have to kind of make an effort to create space for that kind of innovation, right? With a startup, it's exactly the opposite. And this took me, frankly, too long to learn, but I'm catching up.
Mhm.
But you really you have to be so proactive, and you're launching a new initiative, a new project all the time, and defining what the existing projects and initiatives look like. And you're also killing projects and initiatives really fast, right? If it's not working quickly, it's out. Um, and so that level of being very proactive, being almost aggressive in terms of what you're looking for, finding things to do, finding things to launch, finding things to work on to meet your goals. I think that requires a very specific mindset and perspective, and it's helpful to go in kind of being aware of that. You do have to be very proactive. It's actually a working style I very much prefer, but after 5 years in more corporate environments, it definitely took some time to kind of shake the dust off and get back to that kind of mode of thinking. I had a small marketing practice for a couple of years before I did my MBA, so this is not totally a foreign concept to me, but a lot of time in between. So that's one aspect. And then the other big aspect I would say is just with a larger corporation. I mean, look, to be totally honest with you, a big part of what drove me towards startups is the kind of day-to-day grind and monotony of many corporate roles is something I tend to find fairly boring in the long term. Startups are exciting. Everything's changing. Everything's very uncertain. It's very exciting to be in a position where, it feels like a negative way to say this, but I find it gets the point across really well. When you make a mistake, it has actual ramifications for the company, right? Like you can actually be a problem, cause problems, right? And I don't mean to be negative, but that I think that really kind of lands the point that you have a certain level of responsibility, even if you're junior, entry level, you've just joined. When you're a team of 6, 10, even 100 people, everything you do matters, right? But what's interesting about a startup, and I have to admit, I had really underappreciated this before joining, is that you're always so close to incredible success or abject failure, like at all times, which is very exciting but very exhausting. You can have a day where one piece of news can put you on a mental state of like, we might have to wrap this up. This isn't going to work. Or another piece of news can have you going, holy crap, this is the windfall where things are happening. And I've had a few days now where both of those things have happened in the same day.
Oh, wow.
And that's just wild, right? It's quite a roller coaster ride. I can't say it's not fun, honestly. I mean, I think you have to maybe have something a little bit wrong with you, but there is something to that it's exciting,
Something a little bit wrong with you. I like that definition.
maybe yeah. I don't know, but
yeah, it does sound a little bit crazy when
yeah. I mean, look at the odds. It's like, hey, why don't you come work for less money than you've ever made before while working harder than you ever have before for something that's probably not going to be successful? Something's going on for you to go, yeah, that sounds great. Sign me up,
Yeah, it's true. For me, particularly exciting is the challenge, right?
That's exactly it.
I think, you get bored at the corporate job. It's the same for me.
Yeah.
I really get bored, and every company I went to work, I was just like, after a while, I'm thinking, I don't want to spend the rest of my life just doing this. I'd rather have a startup. I don't know if it's going to be successful or not, but the journey is going to be fun.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And also, I think that I learned so much being in a startup, being a founder.
That's
and
it.
Not so much about the business only, but also about myself. Things,
Yes.
When it comes to leadership, for instance, people looking at you, they're waiting for you. And you talk about sometimes you can make some bad decisions that will affect the company. But at the same time, you're quicker to recognize that. And then also maybe it's easier to fix the mistakes and, try to recover a lot faster, as opposed to a large corporation where things take so long,
It's much
and especially
slower.
depending on the size of the company, you need to make a decision, and it has such a huge decision chain that needs to go through, and it takes months for them to decide on something. Sometimes so small, and it's like, that life for me, I cannot bear it. I prefer something.
I agree.
This is it.
I agree. I will say that was one thing I liked about Amazon. One of the leadership principles is bias for action. And when you're on the right team, you can move quite quickly with some things. I wouldn't say it's startup-like, or at least not early stage startup-like, but it's definitely different. And I like it a lot. And, I don't mean to knock corporations. Like, I very much intend to go back into a corporate role at some point in my career. For me, I think changing between environments is very fun, right? Having those different experiences. I was just talking to my partner yesterday, and I was saying, I find myself actually kind of excited at the thought of at some point, returning to a corporate role, just to see how different my experience and perspective is now. You know what I mean? Like, having had this experience of a really high degree of ownership over a large number of programs and over, to some extent, the fate of an entire company. I think that changes your perspective in a way when you come back to a corporation, and changes how you kind of view your responsibilities and your team and what you're working on. And, it's honestly kind of exciting to think about, like, how will this experience, how will this change me as a professional in these environments? So, I think there's a lot to be said, even for someone who's pretty committed to entrepreneurship. Like, there's a lot to be said for moving between the environments. Because the other thing too is you learn a ton from a corporate environment that you can carry over to a startup as well, right? The systems, the processes, like effectively managing a large organization of people and keeping them oriented on the same tasks and motivated and well organized. That's very difficult. And I think it's a growing pain that you see in a lot of startups. And I have a sort of a pet hypothesis that if a startup isn't careful about, bringing on board people with that kind of process oriented, larger company kind of experience and perspective, there's only so far that the original change makers, the folks who like blowing stuff up and making something new out of the scraps, those people are absolutely critical, right? And that's a rare skill. It's something I value very highly. But at some point, you do need these folks who can focus on process and operations, and that, frankly, is also an extremely valuable skill. But the trick is making sure that when you've got a round hole, you get a round peg, right? And I'm personally, from a management perspective, I'm a huge believer in the idea that I don't think there are very many bad employees. I mean, obviously there's exceptions, but I don't think I believe there are far fewer low performers or bad employees than maybe a more conventional manager might say. I think there are mismatches between context and employee, between the team, the responsibility, whatever, right? I mean, I'm a marketer, right? You put me in, say, a technical role, an analytics role, a sales role, I'm going to fall on my face. I'm not going to perform well. I'm not going to be a good employee for you. I don't think that means I'm a bad performer. It just means I'm out of my league. Similarly with management culture, I work really well in a collaborative environment. Like most people, I really value psychological and emotional safety on a team. When I have that sense of support and a feeling that I can make mistakes and the environment and my management will let me learn from them in a constructive way rather than finger pointing, I'm going to perform much better. When I'm in an environment that doesn't offer those things, where I feel like I can't make a mistake or that I'm being held to unreasonable expectations or I don't have the support I need, I'm not going to do well, right? And I think that's true for a lot of people. And ultimately, when you get to a point where you're working in a company like Amazon, when you're working in a startup, you're working around people who have a lot of ability, a lot of drive, a lot of intelligence. Like, you don't get to those points, those positions in your career accidentally, And so my first thought, if I'm on a team, say at Amazon, and I've got someone on the team and they're just not really pulling their weight, my first thought is, where's the mismatch? What's going wrong? Not, why is this person, not up to snuff, right? My first assumption is something is wrong that's prohibiting them, preventing them from performing in the way that I want them to, and chances are the way they want to as well. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox there, but
that's all right. But in that sense, I actually wanted to ask you: is there anything that something that you learned either in Amazon or on the previous job on releasing your brand? Is there something that you learned that you're now applying in Unimart, whether in terms of management or any principles of or any techniques? I don't know. You said that on Amazon, depending on the team you're on, you can go, things can move pretty fast.
Yeah.
Is there like anything from there that you learned in Amazon that you bring into Unimart as well?
Well, from a management point of view,
I don't know.
one thing I think is really critical is empowering the people you work with to disagree and to speak up, right? And to understand that that's a safe thing to do, that it's welcomed. I'm a firm believer that if you hire a bunch of people and all they do is agree with you, you've hired some hands. That's great, but you haven't hired minds behind the hands, right? You're not getting the benefit of the minds behind the hands. If they're just agreeing with you, it's just an extension of your own mind, your own thought process. And so what I really like to see, and I try to encourage, is with the people that I work with, whether they're peers or direct reports or someone else's direct reports that are more junior, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. I want the benefit of these people's perspectives and intelligence and expertise, right? And that means that periodically they're going to disagree with me. And it means that periodically when they disagree with me, they're going to be right and we're going to do it their way, right? And so getting to that point requires building some trust. And to my mind, it needs to be intentional, especially when you're working remotely, as we are with Unimart, at least in the US. And so something I've been working on a lot is, with the folks that I work with on our team in India, so designers, marketers, that kind of thing, is just trying to really work very hard to build that trust, that relationship, to the point where, like my marketing manager in India right now she's amazing, right? And over the past few months, we've I hope she would agree with me, we've really built that kind of an interaction, right? To the point where frequently on our calls, I will put forward an idea and she will say yes or no, but I think we should do something else. And she tends to be right? So we tend to do it her way because she's usually got really good reasons for it. If she cares enough to speak up and disagree with me or add on to what I've said, she's usually got a really good reason for doing it. I love that, right? Like, that's amazing. If she didn't do that, then it's all just my ideas and I'm not benefiting from her expertise and experience, which is worse for everyone involved. So I think that's really critical. And that's something I very much learned in a management environment. I learned it, I would say, equally from having my own managers who did this themselves, as well as my own managers and colleagues that I saw who didn't do this, right? Who created a very different environment on their team. And I got to experience both firsthand and secondhand and made a decision about which one I wanted to actively emulate, which approach. So that's one area that's, I think, is really important. Beyond that, I mean, I think it's hard to kind of point to a specific thing. Obviously I learned a ton about marketing and the e-commerce space while at Amazon, which of course is directly relevant here. I will say there were some experiences I had as a potential buyer of B2B services and software at Amazon that I'm very much taking into account now that I'm kind of on the other side of the table with Unimart. What are the things that resonated with me that I appreciated? What are the techniques or methods of communication that I found very annoying when it came from marketers or salespeople? And really trying to take that into account. And what it really comes down to for me is, I think, just be a human, right? Like try to build relationships, try to put yourself out there so people feel that they have a sense of who you are as a person and who your company is as a brand, rather than just hitting people with cold pitches all the time. I think these things are very important. And then trying to add value, right? Put forward a solution, see what the customer is currently doing, where can you help, challenge their assumptions. If you get to a point where you're sort of a trusted resource, a confidant, whatever, I think it puts you in a really good situation from a selling point of view. And these are the kinds of sellers that I enjoyed working with most and communicating with when I was at Amazon. So I'm trying to emulate that approach to whatever extent I can.
That sounds really cool, man. So how close are you to sellers nowadays? I mean, let's talk a little bit about Unimart now.
Yeah.
Because I guess the goal of Unimart is to help sellers, right?
Yep. Exactly.
So in a nutshell, what can you tell me what Unimart is and what kind of problem you're trying to solve?
Sure. So it's a pretty big platform. Basically, so we model the idea of like a successful e-commerce service business ecosystem across 5 pillars of e-commerce. So you've got finance, operations, logistics, marketing, and payments. And when you look at a lot of solutions today, many of them are a little bit more siloed, right? You have, for example, payment solutions providers. You have logistics solutions providers. The ones that are full spectrum end to end are typically tied to a particular channel. So Amazon, for example, covers all 5 pillars within their own ecosystem, but you're still married to Amazon. So essentially what we're trying to do is provide sellers with the opportunity to create a platform for themselves that is channel agnostic and encompasses all 5 of those pillars. We cover 3 of those pillars ourselves. We don't do payments, and marketing is not an area where we're particularly strong at the moment. However, what we do offer is highly flexible integrations, right? So we can ensure that between our services and whatever the seller is bringing to the table already from the services they're currently using, they can still integrate everything on one platform. A big problem that other integrators face is that without sufficient flexibility, a seller can look at it and say, look, I've got 10 pieces of software. You can accommodate 9 in your platform. That's great. But I've got this 10th use case that you can't accommodate, which means I'm still stuck without a single central source of truth or command center for my business. And that can torpedo the whole deal. So the way that we're accomplishing this is across 3 layers of service. First is the integrator platform. So we integrate the backend software that the customer is using, the seller is using. Whatever they currently have, it could be warehouses, inventory management, 3PLs, catalog management, marketing, if they have a marketing automation platform, that kind of thing. We do this by API integration. And then by doing that, we're able to aggregate all of their order information, their inventory information, everything together. And so that brings us to the second layer, which is a suite of AI functions. And this is a big differentiator for us. We offer a number of resources, features here that are designed to help sellers manage their businesses more efficiently, as well as gain a competitive edge that they would not have otherwise had through, for example, AI-driven insights and analytics from all that data that's now aggregated on one platform. And this is a differentiator for us. There's no other platform that's offering these kinds of AI functions, this sort of suite of services as Unimart is. One of the things that we're especially excited about here too is we talk with a lot of sellers globally, actually, that are really struggling with data management. This is a big problem, especially if they haven't integrated their different channels, their different logistics solutions in one place, and especially for those sellers that are already operating cross-border and selling in multiple countries. They struggle to manage their data. So they're either doing it manually and pulling from many different sources. We spoke to one brand that was saying that it was 3 hours every time they wanted to pull together all the data they needed to put it in order, just to pull together their sources. And at the time, they were only selling across a couple of channels. Or they go and they buy a solution like NetSuite or something, and they're paying tens of thousands of dollars a year for a product that they're only using 5% of, just because they couldn't find anything else that offers the level of customizability they need. And so we're trying to right size that, right? And you're not going to be paying anywhere near that amount for Unimart as a whole, let alone data management services. Anyway, so that's 3 layers of service. So integrator, single kind of command center. So the idea is, after everything's integrated, a seller can manage their catalogs, manage order, manage inventory, manage everything from this one dashboard, right? From this one platform, rather, multiple dashboards within the platform. And then with the AI, you've got all kinds of automation. You can automate reporting, you can automate catalog updates, you can automate inventory management. So automated workflows is a huge component of this. Then the third and final layer is essentially an on-site marketplace of ecosystem partners. So these are like warehouse management providers, 3PLs, different types of freight and logistics providers, that kind of thing. Well, let me walk that back. Freight is not an area we're getting into just yet. We will be soon, but right now we're focused on 3PLs. And the idea here is basically, again, API integration set up with their software. We pre-negotiated prices, often at much lower than the rack rates a customer would get if they approached these services directly. And they're able to contract with these services and then maintain their relationship with them, again, through our platform. So basically, all of that ties together into a package that is designed for a specific purpose. It's designed to help sellers expand organically as quickly and efficiently as possible. And expand organically in this case means adding channels, so managing multiple channels, potentially adding non-e-commerce channels. That's something we can support as well. And moving abroad, moving cross-border, right? And so basically
when you say non-e-commerce, does that refer to brick and mortar as well?
Exactly. Yeah. So we can also integrate brick and mortar like point of sale systems into the platform. Right now, that would be a custom integration. We don't have any pre-integrated, but once we've kind of built out the e-commerce system, that's stage 2. We'll start pre-integrating many of those as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So my understanding, the closest reference I have to something like that is I'm thinking of Magento platform. As a web platform. Magento is very basic on its own, and then you have different integrators. It's not really omnichannel, but it's just the bare bones, and then you can integrate a bunch of stuff just to make it work a little bit better. At least that's how it was. That's my experience with Magento many years ago. I hope it's a little bit better now.
I think so.
But that's the reference I can get it now. But I'm thinking, there are also some solutions for omni-channel. Would Unimart also be considered an omni-channel solution?
Very much so, yeah. So, when we talk about omni-channel, that usually there's a couple of assumptions beyond just multi-channel that sit with omni-channel. So one is that it typically implies that you're selling across different types of channel. So multi-channel could just mean you're selling across multiple marketplaces. Omni-channel usually implies that you're maybe also selling through, for example, point of sale or other channels of sale. Or other types of channels of sale, I should say. Additionally, the idea of omnichannel in a retail sense, because you also have omnichannel marketing, which is kind of a separate concept. Omnichannel in a retail sense includes the idea that you're providing a unified customer experience across all of those channels. And this is really at the heart of an omnichannel experience. So, a customer can buy through one channel, return through another. They have a customer account that's recognized across stores and website. Great example, if you're an Amazon Prime customer and you go into a Whole Foods store, you can check out using your Prime account and gain discounts from that. And then product recommendations on the platform will take that into account. So you go to a Whole Foods and you buy a few items physically in store, and a week later you go, I'm going to get on Amazon Fresh and have groceries delivered. Those recommendations are going to carry over, right? You're going to have this unified customer experience. You could even order from Whole Foods and replicate the order that you made by looking on your account online. So this is a great example of an omnichannel experience. Now, that's much easier for Amazon to accomplish because those are all Amazon-owned properties. Everything's unified or can be unified on the back end anyway, right? But what happens when you've got a Shopify store, an Amazon store, and you're also selling in Walmart, right? That's when things get a little bit stickier because now none of those companies are going to offer you a solution to integrate with their competitors. So you need to find a solution to make that integration happen, or you need to do it manually, but that's going to be pretty much impossible after you hit any kind of scale. And that's where a platform like Unimart comes in, right? We can unify all of those different elements, all those different accounts, all that different data in one place. And then, there's a whole host of different software you can get for things like customer relationship management, for example, for B2C. And while we don't provide those services directly, we can then integrate them into the platform as well. So that can be part of your overall ecosystem within the Unimart platform. And so that's basically the idea, right? It gives you this unified central command center across multiple layers of the business, across all of your channels. Because most of the solutions out there that are providing this level of unity, they're focused on back end or front end or some component. They're not focused on the entire business end to end. So we like to say we're from product sourcing to putting it in the hands of the customer. We have solutions all along, that entire life cycle.
Mm-hmm. I'm just curious then, would that also integrate with ERP systems?
Yeah,
So would that
definitely.
include as well?
Yes. I would say there's often a lot of redundancy between many ERP systems and what Unimart does. And I've taken to calling it a little bit tongue in cheek, but I've been taken to calling it an e-commerce native ERP because realistically, while there are differences between the two platforms, but realistically, I think for most customers up till about the mid-market space, anything below like an enterprise level, really, um, there's not really a significant difference between their needs and what the two different types of software provide. So if a company doing a few million a year, a retail company, is looking for an ERP, there's, depending on their use case and their needs, there's a good chance we'd be a good solution for them, especially if something like cross-border and omnichannel is on their roadmap.
Okay. Another question in terms of reporting. You mentioned something about the AI.
Yeah.
Would I be able, for example, as a seller, to cross-reference data from one platform to another, or one sales channel to another?
Yes.
So let's say someone purchased on Amazon and later on someone else, the same customer purchased from Walmart. Would I be able to see this history or created this persona so I know where are my touch points with this consumer?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Something like that going on there?
You would need a way to identify the consumer. So let's say if they're using the same email address, there you go, right? So assuming the consumer is not deliberately, attempting to separate their identities on the different platform in a way that would prevent you from tracking them. Yes, that's exactly it. And that's part of the beauty of it, right? Because it's very difficult to do that right now without a fairly complex data management system. And a lot of the data management systems that do that, they just do data management, and they cost about as much as we do or more for the entire package. So that's a big part of the beauty of it. And similarly, with the AI layer on top, you can look at things like, for example, let's say you're selling in Shopify in the US and Canada, and you're also on Amazon in the US, right? And you're doing Amazon FBA. So you've got you've got inventory in Amazon. You've got inventory in at least one other, provider in the US for your US fulfillment. And then you might be fulfilling, depending on location, into Canada from the US. But let's assume for the sake of argument that you've got a warehouse and a 3PL in Canada as well. That's at least three different areas, three different types of, or three different places where you're keeping inventory, right? And potentially you could fulfill from the US into Canada in a pinch. But without being able to look at your inventory in a unified sense, it can make product or purchasing planning very difficult, right? It can make it much harder to see sales patterns for demand forecasting. And it can make, just general management of your warehousing and your inventory quite challenging. So by pulling it all together, you can start to see where there might be some interesting trends that otherwise might be lost in the noise, right? And by putting that AI function on top of it, you're able to pull out insights that a human might not necessarily see, but a machine can pull out. And you're able to do that in minutes as opposed to hours, right? Or even just automatically, right? And have an automated report set up for yourself. So, huge opportunities there. We really believe, to be frank with you, that this is ultimately the wave of the future, right? These kinds of omni-channel solutions are already proliferating. There's quite a few available. And this is where the industry is going. And at this point, for a company like Unimart, our goal is essentially to get out there, get enough attention, build our customer base as quickly as possible so that we can, stay in front of this wave. It's an interesting position to be in as a startup. There's no real doubt about, the product need, or where the market is going. It's very obvious. It's really just, how do we kind of measure up to competition and claim that market share as this is growing. I mean, you just look at, during the pandemic, e-commerce grew hugely. It's on track. Actually, I think it might have just passed half of all retail worldwide is e-commerce. And then when you look at the share of e-commerce that is cross-border, it's even more interesting. Before the pandemic, it was around 15% of all e-commerce was cross-border. It's now risen to, I think we're pushing 30% now, so it's nearly doubled. And at the rate it's going, it's projected within the next 3 to 4 years to actually be more than half of all e-commerce. In other words, more than a quarter of all retail globally will be cross-border e-commerce. And that's just B2C. When you look at B2B, the numbers are several times bigger. That's bonkers, right? Additionally, this is one that really interests me. 5 years ago, when I was at Amazon, or 6 years ago, we had not a problem exactly, but a phenomenon we were keeping an eye on. This concept called retail arbitrage. It was basically this practice where people would go and they'd say, "Oh, look, this product's available on eBay for $10 and it's on
Mhm.
Amazon for $12." Now, people were so tied to their individual channels, right? Like you can understand not driving around to different stores to price shop, but not checking out different online marketplaces. You would assume that they all have to be at the same price because it's so easy, 2 clicks and you can check the price somewhere else. Do a quick Google search. People weren't doing that. They were so tied to a particular marketplace that you could actually, and there were businesses that sprang up like overnight to do this. You could set up an arrangement where the person would order that product for $12 on Amazon, and you could go fulfill that order by buying it for $10 on eBay and having it shipped to them, right? So you'd see these customer reviews all the time. It would go, "Oh, product's great, price is great, blah, blah, blah." But for some reason, on Amazon, for some reason it showed up in a Target box. So odd, And we'd go, "Oh, that's because the person who sold it to you is running a retail arbitrage scheme, and it was cheaper on Target. So they bought it on Target and mailed it to you." This got so popular for a while that there were software, like one really famous one was called DS Dominator. There was software you could buy that would actually automate this whole process for you. So you would set it up on the product on the one platform. You would link it to the other platform, and then it would just automate. When someone placed an order, the product would go, "Okay, we're placing an order on the other platform. We're shipping it to this person," and run the whole process for you.
Mhm.
We're just 5-6 short years later, and already now surveys are showing that over half, around 60% of customers say that they frequently will look at a product online and buy it in the store. And about the same number say that they will frequently look at a product in the store and buy it online, right? So that's over half, which means we have at least a little bit of overlap of people who are doing it both ways, right? And that's between brick and mortar and e-commerce. When you get into just e-commerce, totally different ballgame. People are shopping around like crazy now, right? And Google shopping is something that is becoming more and more popular. We saw kind of this U-shape in terms of usage where Amazon became the sort of first point for purchasing, and now we're kind of back to Google because there's so many different options. There's so many specialized marketplaces. So what's happening, you've got the customers moving first. You've got the brands going, "Oh crap, we need to be where the customers are," right? We need to go be on these channels, but more importantly, we need to offer a unified experience. And then the brands are going, "Wait, how do we do that?" Right? The only solutions available, tens of thousands of dollars at a minimum, right? They're these massive enterprise solutions. And even then, you still need a tech team to build out because they're still extremely technical. So that's the problem essentially that we're trying to solve. We're trying to say, okay, we know that customers are becoming channel agnostic. They're creating an omni-channel supportive environment. Brands are recognizing this. They're moving to omni-channel. That's where they want to go, right? They don't want to be tied to a particular ecosystem. So how do they do that? And there's just this mushy middle ground where there aren't really a lot of great solutions. That's where we're trying to come in.
Do you think in the future it might be possible to do some kind of retail arbitrage internationally? Like, because obviously, we see the barriers of transportation is becoming, the world is becoming more and more connected, and it's becoming way easier to do cross-border e-commerce. So I'm just wondering, we see this behavior already, right? In one country, people would just, like I said, they would purchase on eBay and sell on Amazon, vice versa, anywhere, whatever is cheaper, where to get the margin from. But that could, in theory, also be possible. Let's say someone selling in Canada or in the US and also using the same platform.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think
I would suspect that's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to some extent it is, right? That's what a lot of sellers are doing. They're purchasing product in China and then or Southeast Asia, but mostly China. And then they're coming, to the US, or I'm sure the same is happening in the EU, and they're selling it, right? I mean, that's fairly straightforward. I think one of the big difficulties is that to do it at scale, you would need to be able to ship the product cross-border at speeds that the customer would be okay with. Because if they're ordering a product from, say, Amazon in the US and they're in the US and you're shipping it from China, they're going to still expect to receive it, very quickly. So that might not be totally feasible. So I think it would only work across certain countries or certain areas of expectation. But then also your costs, right? You'd have to manage your costs fairly carefully, because that kind of shipping can run up fairly quickly. But yes, completely agree. I think that's probably already happening.
I actually ordered from Amazon US every now and then. Obviously,
nice.
It takes about a week, maybe 2 weeks sometimes to get a product. But one of the things I like is I'm not so much looking at the speed of delivery, because I know it's going to take some time. It's a long distance to come.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just the price, because obviously coming from abroad, there's some import tax I need to pay when it comes in. But it's mostly the products or the type of products you can find on Amazon. Amazon US has a ridiculous amount of I think it's something close to 300 million different kinds of products.
Mm-hmm.
And the closest we have is Amazon Germany with only half of that number. And if you look at other Amazon markets, they don't even have anything close to that. If you look at Amazon Brazil, for instance, there's lacking so much variations on the products. So you look at a product category, there's only a few products that they're top, and then that's it. They don't have much to choose from.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the biggest things, like with Amazon US, and maybe at least the way I believe that why some sellers should try different markets as well, because people want to buy other products too.
Yeah.
But the product is not available there. So they,
exactly.
there's the possibility that now what Amazon is doing is something really incredible, that is allowing the sellers to put their products in different markets really far away.
Yeah, so it's great. But the problem is Amazon doesn't necessarily have the market share. I mean, look at Germany. Zalando is bigger in Germany than Amazon is, So if you're expanding there as a seller and you're saying, oh, I want to, grab some more revenue from this entirely new customer base, in terms of maximizing your eyeballs on your product, there's actually, in most non-US countries, I think it's fair to say most, there's going to be an e-commerce platform that's probably more suitable for you than Amazon. Just in terms of, the number of people looking for your product. So yeah, I think you raise a great point.
Yeah, and we only talk about markets where Amazon is present, but I'm pretty sure there are a number of markets. I already said a few times in one of our previous podcasts here, one of the previous shows, we actually said, I counted here, I told people about some stories that I hear about e-commerce happening in countries like in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And we hear some amazing things happening there. So people are really eager to purchase, and and there is an e-commerce boom happening in some African countries.
Yeah,
the same can be said to Eastern Europe.
Yeah,
there's a lot going on there. Amazon is not present there, but there's still other marketplaces and other websites where you can take advantage of.
Exactly,
and you can put your product, and people are really eager to purchase.
Right.
Amazon in Brazil is considered to be a very expensive channel for the buyers.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's kind of like, it's a little bit more expensive than other marketplaces.
Okay.
But people are still buying. They're still eager because sometimes they find a product that is exclusive on Amazon, and so they still would pay the price.
Mm-hmm.
And Amazon and Brazil has this has this history. Like I was just telling my wife, we're comparing the iPhones. The iPhone price, the price of an iPhone in Brazil is about the same as here in Denmark. But the difference in wage is massive between Denmark and Brazil.
Huh.
And still people are purchasing iPhones in Brazil. It's one of the popular phones as well.
Wow.
So, people are really eager to it's the desire to have some of these products as well. And then the larger the brand you are, the more, this desire increases even more.
Yeah.
Well, so I think business will have a great chance if they try into new markets as well.
Yes. I mean, look, it's Bezos himself said, your margin is my opportunity, right? And I think there you go, right? If it's just operational blockers preventing you from competing with products that have a healthy margin in a particular marketplace, if you have the opportunity to undercut that margin and still turn a profit, I mean, that looks like a pretty juicy opportunity. And honestly, I mean, we've seen that, right? We've got several hundred customers, mostly non-US at the moment. And what we've seen is that within the first 12 months of working with Unimart, on average, they're doubling their revenues in the first year, and they're reducing their costs by about 20%. I mean, like, that's just bonkers. That's like the holy grail of profitability. But this is, I think, I've been in the e-commerce space for quite some time now, and I was actually part of Amazon advertising in the earlier stages. They rebranded and started to separate themselves as a distinct business entity. And, the margins on the advertising business are nuts. And PPC has become, I think, very much the lifeblood of e-commerce, so pay-per-click advertising on the different platforms and channels. And it's super effective. There's a very good reason for why. There's a robust ecosystem around it with all kinds of services to help you optimize and run PPC campaigns. So, I don't want to imply in any way, shape, or form that, that's not something sellers should be focusing on. They absolutely should. However, I would argue that the focus has gotten so heavy on, marketing tactics and especially performance marketing and advertising that organic growth has really kind of been neglected. It's kind of fallen by the wayside. And, you know, as with everything, as with anything, there's diminishing marginal returns as you increasingly invest and optimize and improve a channel. So if you've already dialed in your PPC strategy, you know, there's a limit to how far that can really take you. Now you can launch new products, you can expand your product lineup, you can make changes to trying to appeal to a larger group of customers. But at the end of the day, if you haven't explored it yet, adding new channels can be, especially for a business that's already dialed in, you know, their marketing and advertising, that can be one of the quickest ways to very rapidly add new revenue. Now, the problem is that it's also very expensive. And again, that's where we come in, right? By aggregating everything, by putting the resources you need, like 3PLs and warehouses at your fingertips, by integrating, you know, everything on one platform, and then automating as much as possible. What we're able to do is help these brands to expand while actually reducing their operational time overall from what they were doing before, if it was all manual, and avoiding the need to hire a tech team, to hire additional, you know, buyers or managers to run those different storefronts, and use their existing team to expand. So you're actually improving efficiency to keep costs stable or even reduce them while you're adding new channels of sale to increase revenue. You know, that's not a situation that's going to last forever, but we're in the early stages, I think, of brands really approaching multi-channel and omni-channel expansion and organic growth. And as a result, the opportunity here is enormous, and only some brands are really taking care of it just yet. So there's this massive green space right now.
Levi, it's been really great to chat with you.
Likewise, Raphael. Thank you.
We've run out of time already.
No worries.
I think I'm going to have to invite you to come again.
I would love to. This has been an absolute blast. Thank you.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. And well, we're going to leave the website address for Unimart in the comments or in the description of the video.
Awesome.
But if anyone would like to get in touch with you, what would be the best way? Should it be LinkedIn?
Yeah. LinkedIn totally works. I'm at linkedin.com/in/Levi Reed. You can also do levi.reed@unimart.com. I can send you that, Raphael, to add to the comments if you want. Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you find contact info for me, drop me a line. I'm happy to chat. Unimart is currently my favorite topic of conversation. So I'm always happy to talk, you know, e-commerce, omnichannel, Unimart, whatever. And honestly, to be totally frank, I really love connecting with sellers. I talk with sellers pretty regularly right now who are nowhere near ready to take advantage of something like Unimart. They're very small, getting started. They're upfront with me about that. We still have a call. We have a chat. You know, I share advice where I can, help where I can, intros if there's anything helpful. You know, I'm in this space because I love helping sellers. I love working with these businesses. I love watching the e-commerce business grow. An opportunity to help a seller do that, I consider a privilege. I really enjoy it, whether or not Unimart comes into the conversation. So always happy to connect about it.
That's so nice, man. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks for everybody for watching. And I'll see you next time.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you. Have a good one.